Good evening, everybody. It's a gorgeously bright, sunny evening, and it's set to get really hot this week. Can I welcome everyone to this meeting of Scrutiny? The time is 6:31 p.m. on Tuesday, June 14th. And for those listening or watching, my name's Councillor Caroline Brooke, and I'm the chair of the committee. I have a few housekeeping points to make before we begin. Please can I advise that the open parts of the meeting are being audio recorded and live streamed from the council's website, and in addition a video recording of the meeting is being made available publicly shortly afterwards. For those in the room, please can I ask you to speak clearly and remember to use your microphone. And for anybody online, do we have anybody online, Matthew?
Yes, we do, Chair. We've got Councillor Becker and Councillor Clear.
Okay. For those who are online, may I ask you to mute your microphone and turn your cameras off. Please can everyone ensure that mobile phones and other electronic devices are on silent or switched off entirely. And for those of us in the room, in the unlikely event that it's necessary to evacuate, we all know where the fire exits are because we've all been in here many times. Please proceed quickly and calmly to the assembly point, which is in Abbey Gardens, and do not use the... So turning to the agenda. Apologies, Matthew, we haven't got any, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Becker, who's been replaced by Councillor Edwards this evening. Apart from that, all members are present. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards, for stepping in. Declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest tonight? No? Okay, so we move to the appointment of Vice Chairperson for the Municipal Year 22-23. As this is the first meeting of this municipal year, it will be necessary to appoint the Chairperson. So any nominations, please?
Chair, if I may, I would like to propose Councillor Horrell. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd like to second that. Any other nominations? No. Horrell, please come and take a seat at the front next to you. I know it's scary sitting next to me. While Councillor Horrell moves to the front, I just wanted to make a couple of announcements. So I have two things under Chairperson's announcements this evening. Firstly, many of you will recall that we started a piece of work about mental health support and provision, and I updated you in the March Scrutiny meeting about the first workshop of staff and how and the things and policies and practices they'd put in place to support the staff being absolutely amazing. So then we had a meeting with the housing team discussing how they support our tenants and the practices they put in place to support tenants. Third session was the community support. Again, they put in a lot of communities throughout COVID. A lot of us bounced back after COVID and a lot. There was one particular element I felt was missing. Service staff haven't been trained the same. Staff who go out to their residents, so our people call in that they may need train them, look for. So that was the main back. Mrs. Kirkman will be collating the minutes together for the committee December where we'll thoroughly, and I look forward to it. I just wanted to sorry. Secondly, you will have noticed from the forward plan of key receiving a report update on station approach project. So I was asked by committee members about this report coming to us prior to the Cabinet, and you'll see that you've all been handed out a paper with an updated scrutiny committee work programme. And added to that, we have the update on station approach, general budget outturn and HRA outturn on July, where we weren't scheduled to have a calling a specific meeting to look at these items. So I wanted to suggest the 13th of July to people, and station approach would be the main agenda item, but we'd also take the opportunity to include the 2 outturn reports, housing revenue and general, which weren't able to go to this month's. So I'm supportive of this date option. I just wanted to check that I had agreement in the room that that was something we felt we should do, and we should put the third. Yes, everybody agreed? Wonderful. Thank you very much. That's it for my announcements. So now coming to minutes of the meeting of the 15th of February 2022, and then our second meeting on the 3rd of March 2022 on pages 7 to 18 of your agenda pack. Has everybody had a chance to look at these, and are they a true representation of what happened? Agreed? Those who were there? Councillor Krask.
A bit at the end in terms of resolved. Points were said resolved, but I think there are actions. (15 and 16). A lot of questions. So there was a lot of discussion there. I don't know that maybe it reads that we resolved to whether. Am I making myself?
You are making yourself clear. There weren't, my recollection, there weren't specific things to do. I think most of the questions were answered. There was one that was followed up afterwards. Matthew, have you got the notes in front of you?
Yeah, there's a number of bullet points on page 15 going into 16 that I think Councillor Krask is talking about. I think from memory, they were specific points that were raised on the report, and I think there was one in particular I remember you raising about segregating data from one year to another year, and I think the action there was that officers would going to consider those points in the formation of the next year's report. But yeah, they're in the system, if you like, for preparation of the next report.
That was my understanding of it. Is that okay, Councillor Krask? Yep. Okay, wonderful. So was that discussed? Are we happy to agree the minutes? Agreed. We have no public people in the room, so no public participation this evening, no, Matthew. Okay, thank you. Coming to our first main agenda item, the Q4 Performance Monitoring 2021-22 verbal update from the Chair of the Performance Panel, Ref SC 071 Cab 3347 on pages 19 to 90. And our recommendations are that we note the Performance Panel who met on the 6th of June and receive our verbal update and raise with the leader or cabinet member any issues arising from this report as we go through. So over to Councillor Horrell.
Chair, thank you. Good evening. Yes, we met ahead of tonight's scrutiny and only last Monday. Sorry. last Monday, and the officers very kindly produced our performance panel notes from the meeting from that discussion. We did the usual approach, which was a page turn through the entire set of documents, also addressing the questions that had been asked in advance, and where possible, officers were in the room and able to answer some of those, and where there were gaps, there are actions in the minutes. So Councillors Cook, Crask, Cutler, Westwood and myself were all there to review that data. You'll see that there are, as I say, various action points that we're recommending with particular additional information. Of sort of more significant note, a point that we agreed at a previous scrutiny is that when the council plan refresh takes place, we will look at the indicators that we used to make our assessment, because some of them are almost out of date before they're available and useful to us. Some of them are perhaps focused on areas that are of less interest, but there are other areas that are of interest to councillors and our residents. So that point has been taken on board by the officers, and when they conduct that process, they will take that into account. The Q1 report, though, however, will be based on the previous set of indicators. So we have a further one cycle to go in current analysis. And the Councillor Todd was at the meeting and was happy that he would support that approach. There were some points to follow up on where particular activities, where they were going in terms of the governance process, to which policy committee or how they were coming forward. In fact, Chair, you've picked up one already, because the station approach discussion, which was due to go to Cabinet, wasn't going anywhere in advance of that. So by scrutiny, having the opportunity to look at there were quite a lot of questions, I think, as well around housing, and Mr. Botham agreed, and so did Mrs. Knight, that there would be a housing members briefing on several areas that were being asked around new homes and the like, and it would be better to have that as one members briefing. So Mr. Botham and Mrs. Knight were going to take that away as a particular action, and hopefully craft that into the update that everyone felt that would be really helpful. There was quite an extended discussion about fly tipping, and I think it was Councillor Cutler who suggested that there should be an update on the new process and the new officers available, a briefing note to all councillors, because that is an area that many of us are concerned about, and that we should have the latest information about how we're approaching that as a council now that we have additional resources and a reallocation of those duties. So there were a couple of opportunities for comms to councillors, either in a briefing form or a briefing note that you'll see detailed in the paper. As I say, I'm thankful to the officers for getting this out quickly, because obviously it was a short lead time, so it came after the scrutiny papers, but hopefully everyone's had a chance to review it, and if there are any questions of the panel, obviously we'd be happy to share them with you, Chair, but we hope this is self-explanatory and focuses on the main areas that we discussed on the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Do we have any questions for Councillor Horrell or Mr. Howson at all regarding the notes on that date? No, I'd like to thank you then, and the other members of the panel, thoroughly going through that for us again, and providing us with some good opportunities for comms to members, and for that great update. Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Moving on to item 8, determination of call-in regarding River Park Leisure Centre, Ref SC 069, pages 91 to 98. So it's recommended that Scrutiny Committee note the contents of this report, This isn't an opportunity to ask questions about everything River Park, but we are able to ask questions in response. So choose. So do we have any questions in the room?
Chair, I do, and thank you to the monitoring officer for preparing a thorough response. I suppose my question is that the case law that was quoted, my understanding, and maybe this is a question that has to be taken away, was appealed, and so I'm sort of questioning the reference that's being used, whether that review of that case would have changed, therefore, the monitoring officer's view of the particular point that was in the call-in request, because I understand that they would have found in favour on that case law against in that particular legal discussion that was put forward. So I'm springing that on Mrs. Kirkman. She may want to take that away, and just I can share with her the particular sort of follow-up piece of correspondence I've looked at to see whether that would have in any way changed her view of that particular point in the call-in request.
Councillor Hall.
Yeah, Chair, happy to help with this. So, members, this is referring to page 94 on your agenda pack. And the first ground of the signatories was that the authority had not followed the best value statutory guidance provided by the Department for Communities and Local Government. So this is a best value guidance note that attaches itself to section 3 in respect of that duty to consult, and gives authorities further guidance about how to go about taking such steps. You'll see that my initial response was that the best value legislation did not apply, and therefore the guidance did not apply, and that the Cabinet Report 3342 did already state that at 4.23 in the report. It states at the very last sentence quoted from the report that it is not considered that the proposed decision falls into the category requiring such consultation. That's a section 3 consultation that the guidance relates to. One of the leading cases is Nash in this respect, and this was something that we sought Council's advice on in respect of this particular Cabinet report. Our QC, Matt Hutchins, did review every element, and best value was something he advised on. In his view, this was not a high-level decision concerning the approach to the performance of our functions at Winchester City Council, and therefore his advice is that section 3 did not apply. If there's further, Councillor Horrell, if there's further information you'd like to give, I'm happy to review that, but I am comfortable that we sought the relevant advice in respect of section 3, and that it was covered in the Cabinet report, and that it meant that the ground was invalid because the report did state that section 3 did apply at that time. Yeah.
Chair, I'd be very happy if we could leave this as an open item for me to supply that piece of information to Mrs. Kirkman and ask her to consider that, and also to help us as councillors to understand what is high level, therefore, in our context as a district council. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions on the scrutiny call-in report? I support Councillor Horrell in keeping that item open, and we both discuss that together. That would be really useful, Ms. Kirkman. Thank you for that. Okay, so then we shall consider that report noted. Item 9 of our agenda is the annual scrutiny report. So we've got the draft annual scrutiny report 21-22 Ref SC 066, pages 99 to 166 of your agenda pack. And it's recommended that the committee consider and take any necessary comments on the content of the report prior to its submission to full council. Does anybody have any comments on annual scrutiny report. Councillor Power, I'm aware you're here in a different context, but of course you were there through all of the year, so you'd be welcome too. Councillor Cutler.
I don't find factual any or the fact that I've problems. Partly the performance panel seems to have. At the same time, there were 2 meetings that ran from 6:30. That is an effective use of our. I just wonder if there is any basis for reviewing it within the annual scrutiny. Might avoid very, very long meetings simply because they're probably not. I wonder if there's any value.
Thank you. Councillor Cutler, can I ask you to speak, please? Absolutely. I think I support when the meetings go on too long that we get to a point where we're not actually being particularly helpful and constructive because we're all very tired. We've all worked all day and we're getting to 10 o'clock at night when we'd all rather be curled up on the sofa. So I agree. Perhaps that's something we should review. I'm not sure the annual scrutiny report is the place for that, but I think maybe we should separately discuss that by all means. Councillor Horrell?
I think we would all endorse less longer meetings. However, I do think it's incumbent upon us to have the appropriate discussions, and we haven't got to the work plan discussion, but when I reviewed the work programme, it was orientated hugely towards the finances, which I'm not negating at all, but actually some of the other major activities that we as a council are involved in are not on that work programme. You've asked us today whether we'd have a July meeting to be able to discuss station approach additionally, and also the outturn report that are coming to Cabinet and not being discussed at any other previous committee. And I think there's a question to ask about the flow of decisions through the council wider context and the places where those discussions go in advance. Because I think all members would agree that by the time a decision gets to Cabinet, it's a decision made, and therefore if you want a discussion, you have to find a way of having those opportunities elsewhere in the governance process. And it isn't always a 6 or 7 hour scrutiny meeting, I accept. So we just need to understand where those other elements are coming, because I do think as a scrutiny committee, we have a duty to look at some of those other activities of the council's work, not just as the original draft of tonight's work programme did, which was main significance really on matters. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Cutler?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an element of there's some core work that we can programme in, and then other stuff comes up. It's just when that other stuff comes up, rather than trying to fit it into a meeting when it's something that probably wants a meeting of its own, we may have to recognise as members of the committee that it's one where meetings are added in, and maybe quite frequently added in, rather than try to tack on something that's not programmed into a committee that, I mean, in a different role, was there for that long meeting, but only for the final item. In fact, I went home because I thought I'm never going to get to the final item, and I think that there's something about the programming of things, and maybe the recognition that scrutiny almost has to be a committee that is fleet-footed in having extra meetings when something scrutinising. We can programme in rate, but can't. Flexibility, and I just think we need to recognise that in somewhere in the process. Probably democratic services officers are thinking, oh hell, more meetings, but yeah, I just think scrutiny point of view, that's just really important.
Thank you, Councillor Cutler. We did actually have 2 special ones, and they did also go on for 5 hours. So it's not just when they're programmed in with the other stuff. I do agree there may be some other function, for example, if we have questions about things that are in the paper, just clarification type questions, maybe we find a way of making sure that they are dealt with in advance of the meeting. So when we get to the scrutiny meetings, we are scrutinising rather than clarifying. I mean, maybe there's something around, but maybe we can. Councillor Horrell.
I'm sympathetic to Councillor Cutler's point. However, I would say one thing that I think is important is if scrutiny is going to provide value, then we have to allow time for any comments to then be taken on board by the next committee. And as we found, there had to be some delays last year because, in fairness, work couldn't be changed and amended in sufficient time to then make the next hurdle. So we just need to think about how we do that, because this is a process that we've established and a timetable we've established. And so to try and make it as effective as possible, maybe as fleet as foot as possible, and as robust as possible, we have to just really rethink about the scheduling and how we do that. Because, Chair, as I say, we haven't got to an item tonight, but I have a couple of other things that I think we should have on our work programme, and how they fit in. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on the annual scrutiny report? No? Okay. Thank you, Matthew, for your support with the annual scrutiny report. That's noted by the committee. Coming on to item 10, we have appointments of external bodies related to scrutiny. The committee considers appointments to the following external bodies: Portsmouth City Council Health and Overview Scrutiny Panel. We have 1 vacancy and 1 deputy. Centre for Governance and Scrutiny, Scrutiny Champions Network, which I understand is me by default as Chair of Scrutiny. Partnership for South Hampshire Overview and Scrutiny Committee. So do I have nominations for those? Councillor Horrell?
I'd like to nominate Councillor Reid for the Portsmouth City Council role as the first one on your agenda, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have a nomination from the other side for the Portsmouth Health and Overview?
Chair, if it's appropriate, I'd like to nominate Councillor Cutler, Deputy.
Thank you. So are we all happy that Councillor Reid is the host and Councillor Cutler is deputy? That agreed by everybody? Thank you. As I said, the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny is me as Chair of Scrutiny Champions Network. So the final one, Partnership for South Hampshire Overview and Scrutiny Committee.
Chair, I'd like to nominate Councillor Cutler as the member for that committee.
Thank you. Councillor Horrell, do we have any nominations for that?
Chair, we do. Last time I think it was myself as the deputy. Unless we're going to a vote tonight, it might be better to have one as the member and one as the deputy, if everyone's happy.
Are we all happy to agree that Councillor Cutler is a person and Councillor Horrell is deputy? Wonderful. Thank you very much. So coming on to item 11, the annual report, exceptions to the forward plan 2021-22. FSC 068, pages 123 to 128 of your agenda packs. The committee should consider making any necessary comment on the exceptions to the forward plan. So there weren't a huge number of exceptions last year, but there were a couple, and I agree to all of them for various positive reasons, and they were all valid reasons. So do we have any questions on the exceptions at all? Councillor Horrell.
Chair, I think some action may be taken on this. Several of the ones that are detailed on page 127 of the report are housing ones, and I have made the point before, and I know Councillor Ferguson is sympathetic to that some of the governance processes and the sheer scale of what we do in housing is such that we need to think about how we take decisions, because several of these came after the forward plan was published, all for very reasonable reasons, as you've said, and you approved them. However, as I understand it, Councillor Ferguson is looking at how we process housing decisions. And I can only say that I think that's a very important step to try and improve the throughput of some very important contractual and building project work that goes through that particular department of the council, because I believe of the 5, 3 at least were all housing work the 2021 period.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Any other comments on that? Okay, thank you. We've noted that. Coming on to the work programme for 2022-23, SC 070, pages 129 to 134. The recommendation is that the committee considers the items listed in Appendix 1 of the report and agrees the matters it wishes to consider during 22-23 municipal year and delegates to officers in consultation with the chairperson authority to set the detailed work programme. Councillor Horrell, you already referred to wanting to speak on this.
Chair, I do, and I'm sympathetic to Councillor Cutler's view of sort of flexibility, but I can't believe we're going to go through a scrutiny work programme without discussing any of the other major projects. So station approach you put in, but we have a whole process that we're going through on CWR. That's in train now. At some point in this year, I'm assuming that there'll be something coming back to report to us on all the work that's been done. Such a significant project, I don't see why that is not built in somewhere, and why that would not be viewed.
I had a feeling there is a timetable. Should be able to...
There is, Chair, through you, but obviously it isn't hitting our work programme. So my view is that rather than thinking when is that coming and when, is there a period in which we should be planning CWR, because there is output coming on that through this next year, 22-23. I'm assuming that there will be more work coming on River Park, given that was such a highly contested discussion. And again, I think an update to this committee would not be unreasonable. So on major projects, given that there's no other obvious place for them to go, I think we need to be considering them coming to scrutiny whenever the appropriate timetabling should be. And obviously we'd need to take guidance from officers who are managing those timetables. I think that's not an unreasonable request, and I'd like to ask the committee to endorse that investigated to see how we make that fit. And Chair, the other thing that I'm sort of really surprised at that's not on here is the local plan. There is the LPAG committee, but actually is the local plan going to council? Where is it going in discussion in the broader environment, so all councillors can actually participate? Is it going to council? Fantastic. If it's not, is it coming here so a broader group can participate. And I don't see that here, Chair. And it's one of the most significant pieces of work that we're producing for the entire district this year, and as we go through the first stage of certainly Reg 18. And I'm just surprised it's not on the work programme, Chair. So I don't think they're unreasonable requests. There may be a question about where they come on the scheduling or whether we need additional meetings, but I think they're all things that we as a committee should be reviewing, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Mrs. Kirkman, you wanted to step in now.
Well, I can help on a few of those points, Chair, if that's helpful. The Reg 18 is not a requirement of a full council decision, so that will not go to full council. The Reg 19 is a full council. So it is very explicit what is and isn't when you go through the local plan process. So I hope that helps in terms of confirming that Reg 18.
Sorry, can I just step in there a moment? Just because it's not required to full council, as per it's not required to consult on River Park, just because it's not a requirement doesn't mean it shouldn't.
Well, Chair, all I'm confirming is what's in the Constitution in terms of the documents that have to go through. One of the most heavily legislated areas in terms of development plans and local plans, in terms of executive and non-executive matters, do relate to local plans, so it is very specific. So the Reg 18 is not required by the Constitution to go to full council. So those words are better, but that is the legal and constitutional position on Reg 18. In terms of the local plan, the LPAG, that is seen to do the same work in terms of it's a public meeting, it's audio recorded, there's public participation, there's visiting councillors, so it's doing exactly the same job as Scrutiny. If I was asked for my advice on would it go to LPAG and to Scrutiny, I think that's duplication of the same process, because members are able to go along to LPAG in the same way that they are able to join Scrutiny. So I'm not sure. I mean, absolutely, it's all intended to go to LPAG, and I am aware of discussions in the last week about a members' briefing, so we can set out what these major dates and key milestones are that are coming up in respect of the local plan. But I'm not directly involved, but that's what I know that I hope helps, Chair.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify something. So LPAG, they're not a formal body, are they? Correct me if I'm wrong.
They're not a constituted committee. They are appointed by the executive in terms of to that.
Councillor Horrell.
I think as councillors, we owe a duty to our residents to have complete visibility on the local plan. Something we've all got to embrace because it is for the good of the district for the next 5 years. And just because it doesn't have to go to council, I don't think that's a reason that it can't go. And as we all know, the funnel narrows as you go through the planning process. So by the time you get to 19, you've missed the chance to comment on things in Reg 18 because it narrows as you go through. So if any of us have comments, Reg 18 is the time to do that. And I think we as a council should be open. I don't think we've got anything to hide. And if it goes to council, that's fantastic, or if it comes here. But I do think it would be hugely remiss of us as a council to say that something of such importance to the communities and the economic growth of our district does not have the broadest possible discussion. And I would implore everyone around the table, politics doesn't come into it, that we should have that opportunity. And it isn't just LPAG. LPAG doesn't work in that same way. Yeah, I think if it went to council, fantastic, or if it came here and we all agreed, that would be another opportunity. So I would implore us all to say, just because it doesn't have to, it shouldn't be. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Mrs. Catman, could I propose that perhaps the Reg 18 comes to scrutiny with the LPAG minutes attached, so that we don't have that replication, but we do have the opportunity to give additional scrutiny if required. Is that something that could be considered?
Chair, I can take that back to the lead officers. What I'm looking at right now are the ALPAG details. The purpose of the advisory group is to receive updates and discuss matters relating to the preparation of the council's local plan, assist council cabinet on their decision making. Whilst noting that the decision maker will be cabinet or council, the advisory group may be expected to comment upon the implications of the emerging evidence base and arrangements for community involvement, publication of preparatory draft documents and associated public consultation, any local plan document for initial consultation, any proposed submission local plan document prior to submission to the Secretary of State, the inspector's report and recommended modifications after the examination. So it's clearly in the terms of reference for ALPAG to have those documents and comment upon them, and obviously any member that isn't a member of that group can go along as a visiting councillor. So I do think it has that opportunity for member input. It has that opportunity to look at the emerging evidence base, to comment, to assist with consultation comments. That's the role of that body, and my concern is that we're taking it through a two-stage process that isn't necessary to involve members, because members can go along as visitors to that meeting. I think, and then to say that it shouldn't go to ALPAG and it should just come to scrutiny is then it would be ignoring and a bit disingenuous to their terms of reference. So I am struggling, because I do think it's duplication and it's adding another step to a timetable that is already, you know, there's traction and momentum, and I know the team are working really hard. So I'm concerned another step would be a delay.
Councillor Thompson, you wanted to make a comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come in on this because the timetable is incredibly tight. And as Mrs. Kirkman said, we have LPAG. There is no point in duplicating what we already have. I accept that in an ideal world, we would love to have enough time for it to come here, to go to full council, but you have been the ones saying, please don't let the local plan be delayed. And it is on a very, very tight trajectory at the moment. Now, I'm happy to take that back to the cabinet member, Councillor Jackie Porter, and put it to her and have a discussion about it. But I do think that would be incredible, you know, fitting that in as an extra sort of process, if you like, would be quite difficult as far as I'm aware. I would also like to remind the committee that back in the days of the Claire Lloyd-Jones report, one of the things that the council was really heavily criticised was that our processes were far too lengthy, and also there was a lot of duplication in it. And that's why we came up with, and you know, Councillor Horrell was in the chair at the time, why we came up with the idea of having the policy committees and, you know, sort of coming out of scrutiny, and basically trying to streamline the processes to make it much smoother. And I just think we're almost drifting back to those days where we are going through hoop after hoop and looking at the same report, where actually, you know, we already have a process set up, and it's a process that all members can be involved in. But as I say, I'm happy to take that back and have a discussion with Councillor Porter, but I think that the timing is just way too tight at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I'll leave it to Mrs. Kirkman to have that discussion if possible, preferably rather than you. But I think when we're already delayed 2.5 years on the local plan, I think saying timescales are too tight for the proper scrutiny is a hard pill to swallow.
No,
Councillor
that's
Horrell.
not.
Councillor Horrell.
Is not what I said. We have LPAG, which is the
Councillor
scrutiny.
Thompson, I'm moving to Councillor Horrell now. Thank you.
Chair, I'd be slightly more reassured if we had a timetable currently published about the local plan, but we do not. I know officers are working on that, but we have no idea when an LPAG is coming, and we have no idea which timetable we're working to, and that is because we're behind schedule because the consultation with parish councils, town councils that was due before PERDA didn't happen, and now we're paying the price for that not taking place, having to give those other bodies time to submit their evidence, and now the strategic plan team are having to assess that and are therefore several months behind schedule. I'm not sure that that is any reason not to do due process. And I'm really concerned that this isn't a political matter, Councillor Thompson. This is about openness and transparency. We do not want a situation like River Park where we had hundreds of people thinking that we couldn't go and talk to them. And I think the local plan deserves the opportunity for all of us as councillors to have that conversation. And I'd be highly disappointed if we as an authority said we were just too tight on time not to have that conversation. And I think the LPAG minutes coming here or the decision going to council for 18 and 19, Reg 18 and 19, is not an unreasonable request. If the administration and the officers say no, then so be it. But I think it's incumbent upon us to actually advise that there are many people who want that level of transparency. Thank you.
Councillor Cutler.
Well, Councillor Horrell says she's not making a political point, but Mrs. Kirkman has very clearly pointed out that LPAG is open to the public, open comments, and open to all councillors. What we probably need to do is make sure that councillors and the public understand that LPAG is where it's being scrutinised, because the scrutiny is happening, and I think it is a bit disingenuous to sort of say that to keep coming back to transparency when you propose the performance panel, which is held in private. So within scrutiny, I think you're trying to make a political point about transparency, which is the transparency is there. What we do need, and I agree with you entirely, is to understand what the timetable is. And I think that may help allay some of the fears. So I'd suggest that we ask for the timetable as soon as possible and look at whether LPAG enough scheduled meetings of LPAG can actually fulfil the function. And then it might be better to come back to that question if we don't feel that it fulfills the function. But at the moment, we're being reassured that LPAG is a very open group. And it is quite capable of scrutinising. I don't think we should entirely think we're the only committee that can scrutinise.
Chair, can I be cheeky and endorse Councillor Cutler's view that a timetable would help all of us, because we have no idea when an LPAG will take place, 1, 2, 3, and when they will take place. So a timetable would perhaps offer some assurance so that we could all understand what is before us. Thank you.
Councillor Krask.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions, if I may. Just so I understand, the Reg 19 would come before the full council, not the Reg 18. So would that mean that the Reg 19 would come to scrutiny? The Reg 19 would go straight to council. It wouldn't come to us.
It would go, so the Reg 18 would go LPAG Cabinet, Reg 19 would go LPAG Cabinet.
Okay.
However, Councillor Krask, if it goes to council, all councillors have an opportunity to discuss that point anyway, so it's not as important that comes to.
Sorry, Councillor Krask, that's only what the
Okay, no, just looking to understand. Fine, so the LPAG is it. I want to make sure that I've got the chance to scrutinise it myself. So I'm going to have to go to the LPAG meeting, which I guess I can do. I can just turn up. I don't have to. I've been to one before, and I could just put my hand up and participate during the course of the meeting. I didn't have to stir, answer. I could just speak.
Councillor Krask, I don't want to preempt how we might run Reg 18. As you do tend to get more visiting in public, might be that the team will ask for registrations just so we can manage numbers, but certainly the chair has the discretion to run the meeting in the best interest, as is always.
I think that's where I was going in terms of, it's like the LPAGs I've been to before, it's going to get a bit messy. There'll be lots of people and it'll be a bit of a free-for-all. And I don't know, it'll be a good scrutiny opposed to kind of crowd management.
There would have to be a structure around that meeting.
I take your point, Councillor Krask. I know that our online LPAGs, anybody who turned up was treated equally as though they were a member of the committee and able to speak and ask questions at any moment. And I agree that there were some particularly unruly meetings where I think many of us were wondering what was going on. Sometimes I do agree with that. So with a different portfolio holder, presumably they'll be run differently. It would be useful, I guess, if we had some clarification on that, or if we'd just be able to have 3 minutes to speak, or...
Chair, I think in terms of what I have heard completely loud and clear is the timetable for members for reassurance about what all these next steps are for the year. I know that is work in progress, but that will also include member briefings at times as well, Councillor Krask, in terms of sessions with members prior to these committee meetings. So, but please be assured I've taken that away and that as soon as possible, that reassurance about what those dates are and what the plans are.
Thank you, Mrs. Kirkman. Do we have any other items for the work plan? It's my intention that as we go forwards, we'll look at the forward plan and see what's upcoming, and if there's anything specific to take from that, then we agree to do that. Councillor Cutler?
Well, I just have a question about September, which initially just the quarter one now has the mental health feedback. If that agenda stays at just those 2 items, will we need? Do you know what I mean? I'm concerned about having a scrutiny meeting that has the one of the 2 items on the agenda, something that's already been done again. So I just wonder if it's necessary, but just so, because work programme there's some mid-August, but we'll need it.
Councillor Cutler, thank you for that. Part of what we're discussing now is things we might like on that. So, for example, we discussed our pre-meeting Project Integra. For example, I think we should have a briefing on that. And Councillor Horrell also mentioned some other things, and then there'll be the different forward plan, and we'll look and see if there's items on there we need to bring to it. I expect that there will be other agenda items that come onto that meeting, as typically have done historically.
Chair as well, I was just going to comment, but perhaps now if more's coming onto it. The mental health feedback session was one of the first pieces of work that Scrutiny have done in terms of saying this is something we really want to look at. And although those sessions were taken outside of Scrutiny, that legwork and for that group to talk to officers, I think it would be really helpful if in bringing that back to the committee, they do have an opportunity to discuss that at length if they want to. And so I was quite pleased when I saw the agenda that actually this was timetabled on a quieter meeting, so it did give you that opportunity. So it's there if you want to take it. I'm not saying you will go on, but this is one of the first really big pieces of work that the Scrutiny Committee wanted to own and had asked to happen. So so I'm not sure that's a really short, well, I would hope it's not a really short item because it's some really important work that we've been doing. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Horrell.
And Chair, I hope to the point that the major projects need to be, if we're doing any of those that we've mentioned, that they are programmed in, whenever is appropriate. So if that can be an action, Chair, that would be.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Is there anything else anybody would like to put on the work plan, or any specific topics people would like, as a scrutiny group, we'd like to work on for the next year? There's a Councillor Cutler.
I just wonder at some point, Berkman may not thank me for this, at some point appropriate for scrutiny, or whether it's something is really progress with the agile working and the complete change. Something to understand the productivity effects, the effects on staff. Be quite important, but it could go to a subcommittee of audit and governance on personnel management. I don't know where it's appropriate, but to me, in some ways, scrutiny might be quite.
Absolutely more than happy to put that on the work programme with obviously the agreement of full scrutiny. What I'd say is I just need to look at the timing, because I want to do it at a time that's most productive, when I can give you some information rather than when we've implemented. It would be a few months after that, so that we can give you. There is an awful lot going on in terms of sign-in apps, pods. So yeah, that would be. I think it would be really helpful to brief scrutiny on that.
Thank you, Councillor Cutler. That sounds like a really good thing for scrutiny to look at. A really good idea. Thank you. Anybody got anything else they'd like? Councillor Krask.
Sorry, Jen, not something to add, but just a question. Is this a one and done? Do we get the chance to, probably to the earlier point, do we get a chance to add things to the work programme over the course of the year? Just if I think of anything else.
Any point during the year, there is this lovely form that you can complete. Any councillor can complete this, the scrutiny work programme suggestion form. And you put in the title of the item, and if you can be specific about the section of whichever topic it is that you would like to look at. If you give them something, the team something really vague, then they're not very supportive of it. If you give them something specific to get their teeth into and look at, then yes, absolutely, that can be added to the work programme. So do think about it. And as we said, that's why last time the mental health thing got added on, because it was something particularly poignant. So as the agile working and the way of working has changed, will be this year. So if you do think of anything, by all means, speak to me or just fill in the form and get that suggestion through.
So I've got something bubbling away, but I'm not confident about it yet. But if I speak to Lisa just to check if it's with the scope, that's probably a good thing to do.
And officers can always help you with the form, Councillor Krask, as well, because it does ask about resource implications, if there's date implications, those sorts of things. So yeah, absolutely more than happy. And if it's not Laura or I, we can point you in the direction of the officer that can.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Krask. So on that item, we have added in on the work plan, River Park ? Because as and when things come up. Central Winchester, there's this debate over local plan and Mrs. Kirkman's takeaway regarding timetable and potentially further discussion, if need be, looking at the forward plan items, because things often come up. Emergency things to cabinet, emergency, land transactions, that sort of thing will also come to scrutiny if they come up. Major projects, so as and when there's things moving forward, they will come to us, and look at the agile working and product staff, etc. Does anybody else have anything to add or anything I missed? Councillor Krask.
Not something I was thinking of, but just something which sprang to mind. The climate emergency, we're halfway through the 5-year plan.
Excellent. That would be a really good thing to bring forward. See where we're at as a checkpoint.
Can we take that one away, Chair, to look at how it aligns with health and environment? Because obviously, health and environment, my understanding is most of the agenda is taken up with that sort of activity. So I just would want to check, and that's where we liaise with the chairs of the two and with yourself.
Thank you, Councillor Crass, for that suggestion. Okay, if we've got no more questions or comments on the work programme, I think we've certainly given that a good airing. So thank you. So item 13 of our agenda is to note the membership and chairperson of the performance panel. So that's councillors Cook, Crass, Cutler, Horrell and Westwood, with Horrell as chairperson. So thank you all for meeting last time. Any comments on that from anybody? Everybody happy with that? Yep. Item 14, to note the latest forward plan of key decisions, pages 135 to 140. Comments on that? We've covered off some of it during our discussions about work items. So I just wanted to add that the form I held up for you earlier was on page 133, Councillor Crask, 134 of your agenda pack, the form. Okay, so item 15 is to note the date and time of future meeting of the committee. So meetings going forwards of the Scrutiny Committee at the moment are tonight, then we've added in one for July 13th. And then we've got Wednesday, the 7th of September, Wednesday, the 23rd of November, Tuesday, the 7th of February, and Wednesday, the 8th of March, my birthday. Any comments on those other than it's my birthday? Well, with a bit of luck, it'll be one that needs moving, Councillor Cutler. Otherwise, I might just bring in a cake for myself. Meetings of the performance panel were the 6th of June, the 22nd of August, the 7th of November, and the 27th of February. Does anybody have any comments on any of those? They all look okay to you? Yep. Okay, fabulous. Well, that brings us to the end of our agenda this evening. Councillor Cutler?
Can we all have placeholders as quickly as possible for all those? I don't know if they've all come out already, just in case.
No, I'll follow that up, Councillor Cutler, because certainly I chased up a while ago the autumn term ones.
I may not.
Autumn already. Yeah, I'll chase that up, no problem.
Because the membership's changed, people may have just ignored them. The earlier phase, I may well have done. Either search back for the applications or the new ones just.
Thank you. Well, thank you for this evening. The first one of the year tends to be short and sweet, so it's now 7:35, and that concludes tonight's meeting. Have a good evening.